Welcome to the Leaders Corner podcast, a program that puts you in touch with senior leaders from around the Army Reserve on issues that affect you. This is your chance to hear in-depth conversations that go beyond the talking points. Get first-hand insights on the future of the Army Reserve. All this and more exclusively on the official podcast of the U.S. Army Reserve, the Leaders Corner. Welcome to this edition of Leaders Corner, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the voices of the Army Reserve leadership in a way that's engaging, vibrant, and informational. I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Jeremiah Richardson, and today we have the Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve, Ted Copeland, on the program. For those of you who do not know, our CSM has been in since 1984, has participated in 5 mobilizations, including Operation Desert Storm, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was born and raised in Wapakoneta, Ohio, is a retired police officer, and is a certified firearms instructor. Thanks for coming, Sergeant Major. That's quite a lifetime of service.
Yeah, it just means I'm getting old. That's what that means. Yeah, I've been around a little while.
Yeah, my father actually participated in Desert Storm. Sorry to date you there. But I can't imagine the kinds of changes you've seen in the Army in all that time. Do you miss polishing boots or anything like that from the old days?
I tell you, I used to a lot more than I do now, but it definitely is a level of discipline that we probably need to get back to. Some people thought, well, what's the big deal? You polishing boots? Well, it just shows individual discipline and standards. Is how well you did. Not everybody did great at it, so I don't want anybody to think, oh yeah, in the past everybody spit shined their boots. They didn't, but that was one of the ways that you showed and demonstrated your, that you were a self-star, that you were motivated because your uniform was starched, your boots was spit shined, and it was one way to stand out just at a glance from your fellow soldiers.
Yeah, I also remember adding all this starch on my uniform that was so much it would almost stand up on its own.
Oh, absolutely. Stay-Flow was the liquid starch you would use. And I tell you, when I was on active duty, I actually taught my wife how to starch my uniforms because every morning I'd spend an hour on my boots and she sat there and that was the old original heavy cotton BDUs, first generation. So I taught her how to starch them so that way we could be together and get both those things done and out of the way.
How long do you think you used to spend?
Well, I tell you, it was probably about an hour on my boots, and she spent about that much time on a set of BDUs because you're right, they were very stiff, and it wasn't quite the days of breaking starch of the old green fatigues because those you'd actually have to break to get them to part your hand through. But it was pretty good. I was at Fort Campbell, so the humidity, just like here at Fort Bragg, is very high. So if you didn't do that, they didn't last long after you put them on. So.
Also, I understand you want to talk about NCO traditions today. Can you give me a rundown of what areas you wanted to talk about today?
I tell you, NCO traditions, the standards of NCO. Today I guess we'll probably talk about the NCO induction ceremony, kind of where we come from as a non-commissioned officer corps. I'm a firm believer that if you don't remember where you came from and lessons from the past, then how do you really know where you're going? And I think today our younger NCOs, not that they're no better or worse than we were, I just don't think they have been educated on who they are and why we are what we are as a non-commissioned officer corps.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you think the reason for that might be?
I tell you, if you look back for the last 20 years, after 9/11, it was all about deployments. Most units were deploying every 13 to 15 months, so you were either getting ready for deployment, you were on deployment, getting back from deployment, getting back to family, jobs, college, and time was a problem, just like it is now. Time is our biggest enemy in the Army Reserve, so what comes off the plate, that doesn't affect deployments. So the NCO induction ceremonies, basic things like drone ceremony, doing those what would look like small things but are important, but not important to deploying. So it's not helping with your readiness and deployment, so those things then slip to the wayside.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So I'm going to read this short story here to you, and I want you to tell me your insight on it and how important it is to you. The winter of 1777 was disastrous. The British had successfully retaken many key locations in the 13 colonies, and General Washington's men were left out in the cold of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Morale was at an all-time low, and conditions were so poor, in fact, that many troops reportedly had to eat their boots just to stay alive. No aid was expected to arrive for the Americans, but the British reinforcements had landed. It's no exaggeration to say that in that moment, one cold breeze could have blown out the flames of the Revolution. Then in February 1778, a Prussian nobleman by the name of Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben arrived. He set aside his lavish lifestyle to stand next to his good friend, George Washington, and transform a ragtag group of farmers and hunters into the world's premier fighting force. This was retold on the website We Are the Mighty. So, Command Sergeant Major, do you know what followed from this?
I tell you, Baron von Steuben basically, for a better term, brought standards and discipline to our Continental Army. I think he started out with a small core group of soldiers, taught them standards of discipline, drill and ceremony, but not kind of what we think of drill and ceremony today. It was drill and ceremony on the battlefield, because that's how the armies maneuvered in battle, was by formations. Even loading your muskets at the beginning was 4-step process. So he drilled a core group of soldiers on standards of discipline and how to function as a modern army, for a better term, in combat. He started with a small group, and then he expanded it throughout the Continental Army during the rest of the winter, and that's probably, I would have to say, probably what really turned our fate, because as you said, we were in a pretty bad place at that point, and I think it really turned us and got us where we are.
Now, was there some way that he enforce those standards and discipline? Did you write them down, or?
Yeah, it's referred to as the Blue Book. The original is down at Fort Bliss at the Sergeant Major Academy. It's actually still there. You can actually find it online, pictures of it. But the Blue Book is a precursor of a lot of our FMs today, and the standards and discipline. So drill and ceremony, the Blue Book was a precursor. It had duty descriptions for corporals, sergeants, first sergeants, sergeants major, kind of spelled out what each rank was supposed to be doing. And I tell you, it wasn't. We're pretty big today on very extensive type of writing and descriptions. Back then, it was not that. It was pretty simple. So he codified it in the Blue Book, for us. And I think we followed it for, I can't remember exactly my history, but I think the Blue Book was kind of our foundation, and they followed for 30 to 40 years after that, before we actually started developing other ones. So,
is there something that would be considered like a Blue Book today?
When you go through training now, and as a basic soldier, base train, you get the little soldier's manual now, telling you how you should conduct yourself, and all the general Army business rules that you don't know as a civilian. That's Blue, that kind of precursor. I said the drill and ceremony manual would probably definitely has its heritage and lineage back to the Blue Book, and there's quite a few others that I would say is probably the same. The NCO guide, it has the duty description for all our NCOs, so that's it has lineage going back to the Blue Book.
I imagine that von Steuben was all about drill and ceremony back then, because it was important for lining up your formations. What value do you think is in drill and ceremony today outside of basic training?
Well, drill and ceremony is very important, and I tell you, it's for our leaders today, I don't think they really understand that. It builds standards and discipline in small unit formations. What I was just explaining to a bunch of NCOs the other day is, once the NCO learns his job, can march his squad or platoon around, it actually builds faith of his soldiers in his leadership skills. They trust him. Now they understand, he or she knows what they're doing. Builds just not the standards of discipline, but builds confidence in our soldiers. Teaches them to work as a team, that you have to work as a team, which in the Army is critical for us. You have to work as a team. So it does a lot of things. It builds morale. It almost can go on and on. It's all these small things, again, that don't seem from far away means much, but for the standard soldier, small unit, it's a critical piece of our not just our heritage, but our future on how our soldiers should conduct themselves and be trained.
Why do you think that things like drill and ceremony have fallen off?
I tell you, it may sound, saying the same things over and over, but it goes right back to where we've been for 20 years, how busy we are as a force, just not a reserve force, but an army as a whole. And when you only have so much time and you have so many requirements, we take things off the plate. And, this is one thing that we think don't have an effect. But now, long term, if you look at it, and we wonder why some of our standards and discipline in our force, it's maybe we're struggling with a little bit, but it all builds. I always tell people it builds. You start at the smallest thing, and just like not doing drill and ceremony or doing police call. How often do we do police calls anymore? And a soldier pick up a piece of paper, and they're walking, and of course they're like, why are we walking this field picking up paper? Well, it all builds because I'm a firm believer that if a soldier don't know that the little things are important, will they do big things when nobody's watching? Because it builds on you. I don't know how else to put it, but all starts to the left in this small thing, but it really ends up to the right in a bigger picture. It's always hard to put to words, and some people may not agree with me, but I just look at it that way. If you do little things right, you'll definitely do the big things right. No question. It's confidence in their leaders, in their soldiers, knowing that soldier will do the right thing when nobody's around to give them advice and guidance because you build the foundation.
Right. There's also the aspect, I think, in today's modern army where, we often get caught up in our own jobs and MOSs and our cubicles per se, and we don't do stuff together as much.
Oh no, that's correct. And I think you hit it right on. It's I think we've went to that. We think that our MOS skill sets are more important, and we think that we just have the soldier skill sets. But it's all relevant that if you don't train on certain things, then how do you have it? So if young NCOs don't know that they have to take their soldiers out and do drill and ceremony because when they were soldiers it wasn't done, then how would they go do it? Most of them won't think about going do it because they've never seen it. So it's habit. So it's generational. If you don't change how you do business, it just keeps repeating itself every generation because the old generation trains the new generation, and it just keeps going. So I think, it's kind of where General Lucky's taking us as a force, and the Army also is moving that way, is we got to get back to our basic soldier skill set. Fight, survive, be lethal, survivable, before we can even think about doing our MOS skill sets. So this is one of the ways that the NCO Corps supports the officers' visions and intent, the commander's vision and intent, is by training our soldiers so they can meet and get to that intent and vision that the commander has and the goals he has set.
Is there anything else from that original Blue Book, that foundational set of documents, that you think needs to be flushed out for today's NCOs?
I think the NCOs, using the current NCO guide, gives us our duty descriptions per rank. So sergeant, team leader, staff sergeant, squad leader. And the Blue Book kind of, like as I said earlier, kind of spelled out those basic responsibilities. I think our NCOs have to get back to doing that, learn those basic responsibilities. That if you're a team leader, you have 2 or 3 soldiers that you are personally responsible for. I don't think we have that concept right now. Sergeant just says, well, I got a couple soldiers, and we'll do some training that somebody sets up, and it's on the training, but I don't know if they've taken a personal interest that each one of those soldiers is really their responsibility to make successful, at least as best they can, by training, mentoring, guiding them. I think over the last 20 years or so, I think we've kind of, just like everything else we talked about, we kind of morphed away that sergeant knows that. Mm-hmm. Well, I would argue today that a lot of our young sergeants to mid-grade sergeants don't know that because didn't have time to do that. Didn't have time in their units to get that mentoring train. I come off active duty in 1988, and turnover in our units were a lot slower than it is today.
Yeah.
Maybe E4 and below, do their 4 years, 3 years, and get out, but the NCO stage. So, if you're a team leader, you're probably a team leader 2 or 3 years at least. So you had 2 or 3 years, 2-3 annual trainings to actually learn your skill in your job at that level before you got promoted.
Mm-hmm.
I think now we're not so much promoting faster. We're just promoting before people actually fully learn their skill set at that level. So, I'm right back to if E6s don't know drill and ceremony is important, don't know how to do it, then who's training the E5s?
Mm-hmm.
And if the E5s don't know, who's training the E4s? So I think we have this concept in our Army that certain things are left to company level activity to be trained. But if the trainers at that level don't understand how to do it or why to do it or even they need to do it, it don't happen.
Right.
Don't happen.
I think we could talk about that all day, but there was some other things you wanted to talk about here while we're here today. You were passionate about units conducting the NCO induction ceremony. Why is it so important, and what does that establish for our NCOs?
I tell you, it establishes a baseline. So, when you get promoted to specialist or corporal E4 to sergeant E5, it's supposed to be a big step into the leadership world that now should be responsible. You're just not a troop. The expectation's higher. So, conducting that ceremony, one, can be a very small ceremony, could be a very big ceremony, but it's really supposed to pass on to that young NCO that now they're part of something bigger than themselves, something important, something really important that they don't even realize that's important. So if we don't do that, then how do we carry that on? Like I talked about earlier about traditions, about our history. If we don't do these, then it don't happen. Unfortunately, today in our Army, I run across from young staff sergeant majors, E9s down to E5s, never been inducted in our NCO Corps. And then I'll talk about Baron von Steuben, and it's probably 50-60% of these NCOs don't know who that is, don't know what the Blue Book is. So if our listeners haven't figured out by now, I'm very grounded in our history and our past and our traditions, because if we're not, we will lose them. And unfortunately, it could be bad for our Army in the long run, because it does build that foundation of everything that we do. And I hate to keep coming back to standards and disciplines, but if your NCO don't know that's his or her job, then it's not the commander's job. The commander oversees it and imposes punishment and all that stuff if you do something wrong. But the hopes is standards and discipline will slow down the bad activity to a certain extent. It's never going to end at all, but so it's critical to us.
So what would you say to the E6, who's been in for a while and has never had the opportunity to do that? Like, why should they do the induction ceremony?
Because it starts them. One, it gets them to understand the traditions and what it's all about and where we come from. But two, then it sets the tone for their soldiers under them and everybody junior to them to say, wow, this is important. It's like anything. If you don't lead by example, then will your followers do what you want them to do? Mm-hmm. No, you should always ground yourself. I've done several induction ceremonies where I was a guest speaker, and we've had E9s being inducted into the NCO Corps, E8s, E7s. So it's never too late to get grounded back to where you started from, maybe re-energize yourself as a non-commissioned officer and say, okay, wow, this is important. I tell you, most of the time when soldiers go through it, where they're participating or watching, and even I'll invite officers to come and sit and watch, once it's over, it's always, wow, this is something good. Mm-hmm. This we should be doing this. Yeah, we should be. So it's been one of my pushes in the last 2 years is, kind of codify it. I don't like to do it this way because you can do it many ways, but got to do it. And, it's been a big push through the senior CSMs to start doing it again.
Yeah, it seems to me from the way you explain it and what I've seen, it should be treated like a rite of passage. Wearing those stripes matters. And I think it just emphasizes how important it is taking on that leadership role. Oftentimes I've heard people say that being an NCO is a lot like being someone's dad.
No, that's probably true. And you hit it right. It is a rite of passage. You're supposed to step up out of the soldier, irresponsible, expectations are low, to that NCO who now is the leader, high responsibility, high expectations. It is that step. And we struggle, on active duty, and I heard they're not doing as much as they used to, but if you got promoted sergeant, you were moved out of the company to a different company, if possible, if not at least out of the platoon to a new platoon, to get you away from your buddies, those other E4s, E3s that you were running around getting in trouble with and all that good stuff, and to get that separation, because it's hard.
Yeah. It's
hard to... Now I'm the leader and telling your buddy what to do, because they're going to come back to you. Hey, man, come on.
Yeah.
We're friends. Give it to Joe over there. So, no, you hit it right on. I know some people listen may think, it's not that important, but it is. In the big picture, it is important if you tie it all together, but it all has to be tied together.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that I noticed the guys who are more combat arms oriented very much understand, because you have that sergeant who's telling you to go over that hill, and having to earn that respect and have that respect means a lot. And sometimes that can get lost in some of the support roles.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard enough to be a leader and tell a soldier to do something that they may get hurt, but how do you do it when you're buddies? That's why the separation from NCOs to soldiers is supposed to be that critical. Not supposed to be, you're supposed to be more their dad, their mom, their big brother, big sister, not their personal friend. Because so you can make those hard decisions and get that action you need when you need it.
That can be difficult at times.
Oh, absolutely.
So can you tell me a bit how these core traditional values and these NCO values apply to your personal life?
That's interesting. I tell you, it's kind of funny. Many years ago, because I've been married almost 36 years, the wife made it pretty clear that she was not one of my soldiers and my children were not my soldiers. Now for personal life, I tell you, I've been blessed. I'm a retired police officer. I've done many things. I think, police work's a lot like military, probably the closest thing there is. It's pretty structured. There's a rank system. Standards are high. I think I've lived my whole life, because I went on active duty. I was, I think, 19. I held off, waited a year, just didn't work, so I went into the Army. And was married, had my daughter was 2 when I went in the Army. So for me, it's wow. It's hard to put to words, but the discipline. I'm all about discipline. I'm all about self-discipline. I'm all about routine to a certain extent. Everything the Army is pretty big on is kind of the way, I like structure. I used to say I would go back to basic training. Most people hated basic. I'd go back to basic. They tell you what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And if you do it, they leave you alone. I'm good. I like that structure. Just tell me what you want, how you want it, to a certain extent, and let me do it. So I think it's been a very positive my life. Life's not easy for, but, kids, job, all that good stuff. I think it's been basically a foundation that I grew up on. Now, the wife and I talk a lot about the Army and what it's done for us. And, the Army's not always easy, all the deployments and all that separation. But in my personal life, it gave me a grounding, for a better term. Kept me out of trouble.
Yeah.
Gave me values that we talk values, but everybody, we talk them, but
right.
How to live your life, and then being a police officer is the same way. There's values and rules you should follow to be a good police officer, and it keeps you out of trouble and keeps your reputation. And that's probably the biggest thing, is keeps your reputation. So that way, when you do go to court and trials, you do less of it if your reputation's good, and everybody knows what you said is what you did. There's no elaboration. There's no fudging of what happened out there on the street to be in question. So so for me, it's been a good thing.
Yeah, I think that having those values, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage, definitely gives us a baseline from which we can always come back to these traditions that you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I know we get upset when soldiers do the strangest things, where it's just stupid things or criminal things. We're only human. So, yeah, we imply, our 7 Army values on soldiers when they come in the Army. But it's a baseline. It should be something that we should always be able to reflect back on before we do things, hopefully, to help keep us on the straight path. But sometimes it just happens anyways. But it's important. Even today's society, I got younger generations now. They think a little different. I'm not saying they think bad, because they don't. They just think different. But I think a lot of them, especially if they're in the military, where it's the Army or anything, I think they are seeking this type of thing where they really know or can put to words that's what they're seeking.
And you would maybe hope that by, incorporating the NCO induction ceremony, teaching our NCOs their history, that they might come to own their stripes even more when they're in their civilian world, when they're in a non-duty status.
Maybe. I used to tell young E5s, team leaders, give me a couple hours between drill, 2-3 hours for the month. Staff sergeants add 3 or 4 more hours. Platoon sergeants a little more. First sergeants probably 8-10 hours between drill. The week before drill, call in. If you're first sergeant E7, call into the full times. Okay, what's going on? What's happening? Yep, I got the training schedule. Is this all ready? Talk to the personnel sergeant. Which one of my soldiers need a birth month audit this weekend coming up? Which one's trying to get yourself prepped? Right. Instead of when you walk in Saturday morning, and if you have a pre-formation meeting as leadership trying to cram it all on what all is happening today, you should already have a kind of an idea by prep. We don't need the world from them. I don't need 5 full days between drill. I just need some prep time.
Yeah.
Own it. We're right back to the NCOs owning it, being accountable. We've kind of let it slip away because of the time factors and limiting factors of, wanting them to get back to their family and jobs between MOBs. So we've let a lot of this slip away for the right reasons. But how do we get it back now? How do we build that culture back? And that's what it is. It's a culture. It's it's a culture of how we do business. So I'm always striving, and I ask young NCOs all the time, how do I do this? And they even struggle with trying to give me an answer. How do we do this? So
right. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to
ask? I want to read a little paragraph out of the original Blue Book. Stay with me because I'm going to read it in the language it was written. So it's kind of funny. It don't sound right grammar-wise, but it's kind of interesting. It says, each sergeant and corporal will be in a particular manner answerable for the squad committed to his care. In our day, is his and her care. He must pay particular attention to their conduct in every respect, that they keep themselves and their arms always clean, that they have their effects always ready and put where they can get at them immediately and even in the dark, without confusion. And on every fine day, he or she must oblige them to air their effects. So, basically count for the equipment, make sure it's clean and serviceable, and that they themselves are fit, clean, and healthy.
Yeah, I caught the clean reference there. Make sure you let your laundry air out. So, that's just as important today as it was in 1778. Yeah. You've ever been in a stinky barracks, you definitely.
Yeah. But see how important that is, where they spelled out for that sergeant corporal to have that type of attention to detail with each one of their soldiers. And it's probably just more important today because we have more things, more stuff, more equipment, more technical equipment when it comes to, we just don't have a musket and a backpack. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's hard to read the language a little bit because it's kind of a 1700s kind of verbiage and grammar, but if you really think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Command Sergeant Major, thank you for coming today. We'll be eager to have you again when the opportunity presents itself.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate it, and hopefully if just several of our NCOs out here kind of understand what we were talking about and actually start getting after it, then we're successful.
All right. Well, that's it for this edition of The Leader's Corner. Tune in next time for an episode all about VA benefits. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of The Leader's Corner. For more information about this podcast or the Army Reserve, go to usar.army.mil or download the Double Eagle app in the Google Play Store for your mobile device. We hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining.